The alarm on Jiwoo's wrist device buzzed at exactly 0600 hours, same as every morning. He sat up in his small bunk and rubbed his eyes. Outside the narrow window of his habitat module, the dark surface of asteroid K447 stretched endlessly, lit only by distant stars. He had been working on this mining colony for 2 years now, and every day looked the same. Jiwoo pulled on his worksuit and grabbed his tool belt. Today he needed to check the old mining shaft in Sector 7. Nobody had been down there in months, maybe years. The company wanted to know if it was worth reopening or if they should seal it permanently. It was boring work, but Jiwoo preferred boring. Boring meant safe. Boring meant alone. He ate a quick breakfast of protein bars and coffee, then headed out through the airlock. His boots crunched on the asteroid's dusty surface as he made his way to the shaft entrance. The sun was rising behind the nearby planet, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. Jiwoo activated his helmet light and descended into the tunnel. The shaft went down about 50 meters with old support beams and abandoned equipment scattered along the walls. Jiwoo checked the structural integrity with his scanner. Everything seemed stable. He was about to mark it as salvageable when he heard something. A small sound, almost like a whimper. Jiwoo froze. There should not be any sounds down here. The asteroid had no atmosphere outside the habitat domes, and this shaft was supposed to be empty. He moved forward slowly, his light cutting through the darkness. The sound came again, louder this time. It was definitely alive. At the end of the tunnel, huddled behind a broken mining cart, Jiwoo found them. 3 small creatures, each about the size of a large cat. His breath caught in his throat. He knew exactly what they were. Everyone in the galaxy knew what a Vral looked like. The Vral were the most feared predators in known space. They had 8 limbs, each ending in razor-sharp claws. Their skin was covered in dark scales that shifted colors based on their mood. Their mouths had rows of teeth designed to tear through metal and flesh alike. Adult Vral stood 3 meters tall and could kill an armed human in seconds. Wars had been fought over Vral territorial disputes. Colonies had been wiped out. But these were not adults. These were cubs, and they were in terrible condition. Their scales were dull and cracked. Their bioluminescent markings, which should have glowed bright blue, barely flickered. One of them had a deep gash along its side. They looked up at Jiwoo with large eyes, too weak to even hiss at him. Every instinct told Jiwoo to run. Protocol said he should immediately contact security and evacuate the area. The Vral Dominion would send ships to retrieve their young, and humans should stay far away. Getting between a Vral and its cubs was considered suicide, but Jiwoo did not see monsters. He saw 3 scared children who had been left behind to die. He knelt down slowly, keeping his movements gentle. The largest cub tensed, trying to position itself between Jiwoo and the other 2. Protective even when dying. Jiwoo pulled a protein bar from his pocket and broke off a piece. He held it out, not moving closer. The smallest cub crept forward first, sniffing the food. It grabbed the piece and ate it quickly, then looked up at Jiwoo with something like hope in its eyes. The other 2 followed, cautiously taking food from his hand. Their tiny claws were sharp but careful, never scratching him. Jiwoo made a decision that would change everything. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around the injured cub. Then he gathered all 3 of them into his arms. They were heavier than they looked, but they curled against his chest, seeking warmth. Jiwoo could feel their hearts beating fast, could hear their weak breathing. He carried them back through the tunnel, up to the surface, and across the dusty ground to his habitat. His mind raced with the insanity of what he was doing. He was bringing apex predators into his home. He was violating about 40 different regulations. If anyone found out, he would be arrested, maybe executed, but he could not leave them there. Inside his habitat, Jiwoo set the cubs down gently on his bunk. He pulled out his medical kit and began treating the injured one's wound. The cub whimpered but stayed still, as if it understood he was trying to help. Jiwoo cleaned the gash and applied synthetic skin patches. His hand shook the entire time. The other 2 cubs explored his small living space, sniffing everything with curiosity. One of them knocked over his coffee mug. and Jiwoo laughed despite himself. They were acting like normal, curious children, not killing machines. He heated up more protein rations and gave them real portions this time. They ate hungrily, and Jiwoo could already see their markings growing brighter. He filled a bowl with water, and they drank desperately. How long had they been down in that shaft without food or water? As the asteroid's night cycle began, Jiwoo dimmed the lights in his habitat. The cubs seemed to relax in the darkness. He made beds for them out of spare blankets, arranging them in the corner. But when he climbed into his own bunk, the cubs did not stay in their corner. They climbed up and curled around him, their small bodies pressed against his for warmth and safety. Jiwoo should have been terrified. He was sleeping next to creatures that would grow up to be deadly hunters. But all he felt was a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, since he had lost his family, he was not alone. The cubs purred. It was a sound no human had ever heard from a Vral before. It vibrated through his chest like a gentle motor. Jiwoo closed his eyes and let the sound lull him to sleep. He would figure out what to do in the morning. Right now, 3 small lives depended on him, and he would not fail them. The galaxy might call him crazy. The governments might call him a criminal. But Jiwoo knew one simple truth that would prove stronger than fear or law. These were children, and children deserved someone who would fight for them. Jiwoo woke up to the feeling of something rough rubbing against his face. He opened his eyes and found the smallest cub licking his cheek with a sandpaper tongue. The other 2 were still asleep, curled up like balls of scales at his feet. Morning light filtered through the window, and Jiwoo realized he had actually slept through the night with 3 Vral predators in his bed. He sat up carefully, trying not to disturb the sleeping cubs. The small one chirped softly and climbed into his lap. Jiwoo found himself petting it like he would a cat, running his hand along its scaled back. The cub's bioluminescent markings glowed a soft blue, much brighter than yesterday. It was already getting healthier. Jiwoo needed names for them. He could not keep calling them the big one or the small one in his head. He looked at the cub in his lap, the smallest and bravest. Hana, he said quietly. The name meant one in Korean, fitting for the first to trust him. The cub tilted its head at the sound, and Jiwoo smiled. The largest cub, the protective one with the injury, he named Sola. It meant pine tree, strong and enduring. The middle cub, who had been watching everything with bright, curious eyes, he named Duri. It meant two, but also carried the sense of looking around, of curiosity. Over the next few days, Jiwoo fell into a routine with his new family. He would wake up, feed them protein rations mixed with mineral supplements, then take them with him as he worked around the habitat. They followed him everywhere, their 8 legs moving in coordinated patterns that seemed almost like dancing. Duri loved to investigate everything. The cub would pick up tools with its smaller front claws and examine them carefully, trying to figure out what they did. Hana preferred to stay close to Jiwoo, often riding on his shoulders as he worked. Sola watched over both siblings, always positioning itself between them and any potential danger. They learned fast, too fast. Within 3 days, they understood basic commands in both Korean and Standard Galactic. They knew their names. They knew stop and careful and bedtime. They even started to understand which objects were tools and which were toys. But Jiwoo knew this could not last. On the 7th day, his luck ran out. He was teaching Duri how to use a wrench properly when his door suddenly opened. Security Chief Kang Minji stood in the doorway, her hand on her weapon, her mouth open in shock. She had come for a routine inspection. There was no routine about what she was seeing. 3 Vral cubs froze, staring at the stranger. Sola immediately moved in front of the others, scales shifting to a warning red. A low growl came from its throat. "Jiwoo," Minji said slowly, her voice carefully controlled. "Step away from them now." "They are not dangerous," Jiwoo said, not moving. "They are children. They are Vral." Minji's hand tightened on her weapon. "Do you have any idea what you have done? If the Dominion finds out we have their cubs, they will destroy this entire colony." Hana, sensing the tension, climbed down from Jiwoo's shoulder and pressed against his leg. The cub looked up at Minji and made a small, plaintive sound. Not a threat. A plea. Minji's expression flickered. She had expected monsters. She was seeing scared children hiding behind a human for protection. "Please," Jiwoo said. "Just look at them. Really look." They were abandoned in the old shaft, dying. I could not leave them there. You should have contacted security immediately. So you could let them die, according to protocol? Minji was silent for a long moment. She looked at the cubs, at how they stayed close to Jiwoo, at how Sola was protecting its siblings even while injured, at how Hana was trembling against Jiwoo's leg. She had children of her own back on Earth. She knew that look, that fear of losing the one person who made you feel safe. 48 hours, she finally said, lowering her weapon. You have 48 hours to figure out what to do with them. After that, I have to report this. I am sorry, but those are the rules. Thank you, Jiwoo said, relief flooding through him. That is all I need. After Minji left, Jiwoo immediately contacted an old friend. Dr. Bae Hyun was a xenobiologist working in the inner colonies, someone Jiwoo had known in university. If anyone could help, it would be Hyun. The video call connected after a few minutes. Hyun's face appeared on the screen, older than Jiwoo remembered, with tired eyes that had seen too much strange alien biology. Those eyes went very wide when Duri walked across the desk in front of the camera. Is that a Vral cub? Hyun whispered. 3 of them, actually, Jiwoo said, showing the doctor all 3 cubs. I need your help. For the next hour, Jiwoo explained everything while Hyun took notes and ran scans through the video connection. Finally, the doctor sat back and removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly. Jiwoo, what you have done is impossible. It should not work. But it is working. Yes, that is the problem. Vral cubs have a critical bonding period in their first months of life. During that time, they imprint on their parent clan. Whoever feeds them, protects them, becomes their family in their minds forever. Jiwoo felt his stomach drop. What are you saying? I am saying these cubs think you are their parent. In their psychology, you are Vral. Or more accurately, you are their clan leader. They will follow you, protect you, and yes, refuse to leave you. The bond is probably already permanent. That is good, right? That means they will not attack me. It also means they will not accept other Vral as their family. If you try to return them to the Dominion, they will resist, possibly violently, and if the Vral reject them, they will die. Not physically, but psychologically. Vral who lose their clan become broken. They stop eating, stop fighting, just fade away. Jiwoo looked at the 3 cubs playing together on his floor. Hana was showing Duri a shiny bolt she had found. Sola was watching them both with obvious affection. They were happy. They were healing. Then I will not send them back, Jiwoo said firmly. The Dominion will demand it. They do not leave their young with other species. Then they should not have abandoned them. The next day, Minji returned with news. She had managed to contact a Vral scout ship. They were coming to retrieve the cubs. They would arrive in 6 hours. Jiwoo spent those hours with Duri, Hana, and Sola. He played with them. He taught them new words. He held them close and tried to memorize every detail just in case. The cubs sensed something was wrong. They stayed closer than usual, their markings flickering with anxiety. When the Vral ship arrived, Minji escorted 3 Vral warriors to Jiwoo's habitat. They were massive, easily 3 meters tall, their scales shifting patterns of red and black. The lead warrior, who introduced himself through a translator as Commander Throck, looked around the small space with obvious confusion. Where are the cubs? Throck's voice was like grinding metal. Jiwoo pointed to the corner. The 3 cubs were hiding behind his bed, pressed together, their eyes wide with fear. They looked at the adult Vral and did not see family. They saw strangers, threats. Come, Throck commanded in the Vral language. We returned to the clan. The cubs did not move. Sola hissed, a sound of pure defiance. Throck stepped forward and all 3 cubs scrambled backward, pressing themselves against the wall. Hana started making a distressed keening sound. Duri looked at Jiwoo with desperate eyes. They will not go, Jiwoo said quietly. They must go. They are Vral. They are children who know only one parent. Me. Throck stared at Jiwoo as if he had spoken gibberish. In the warrior's experience, cubs always returned to their clan. Always. This was impossible, but it was happening right before his eyes. This cannot be, Throck said, and for the first time his voice held something other than authority. It held confusion, maybe even doubt. Commander Throck stood in Jiwoo's habitat, trying to understand what his eyes were telling him. 3 Vral cubs were refusing their own kind. They were hiding behind a human, a prey species treating him as their protector. In 10,000 years of Vral history, this had never happened. It could not happen. The cubs are damaged, one of the other warriors said. We should leave them. Broken cubs do not survive. They are not broken, Jiwoo said sharply. Look at them. Their markings are bright. Their wounds are healed. They are healthy and strong. Throck had to admit the human was right. The cubs looked better than many clan-raised young. Their scales gleamed. Their movements were coordinated and alert. They showed intelligence in their eyes. They were perfect cubs except for one impossible detail. You have done something to them, Throck said. Some human trick. I fed them. I gave them water. I kept them warm and safe. That is all. That is what clan does. You are not clan. Jiwoo met the massive warrior's eyes without flinching. Tell that to them, Throck growled, a sound that made the habitat's walls vibrate. He spoke in the Vral language again, using the ancient call that all cubs were bred to obey. Come, now, clan demands. Sola stepped forward, placing itself between Throck and Jiwoo. The cub's scales shifted to aggressive red and black patterns. Its small claws extended. It hissed a challenge at a warrior 50 times its size. The other two Vral warriors reached for their weapons. This is an insult, one snarled. The cub challenges clan. No weapons, Throck ordered, holding up a hand. He stared at Sola with something like wonder. The cub protects its clan leader, as it should, but its clan leader is human. What do you want me to do? Jiwoo asked. Force them to go with you? Drag them away while they fight and scream? Will that make them good Vral? Throck did not answer. He turned and left the habitat, his warriors following. But Jiwoo knew this was not over. He had maybe bought hours, not days. He was right. Within 3 hours, his communication console lit up with priority calls. First from Admiral Cho Daehyun of the Human Defense Fleet, ordering him to surrender the cubs immediately to avoid an interstellar incident. Then from the Vral Dominion's Huntmaster Council, demanding the return of their young. Both governments were treating this as a crisis. The story had leaked somehow. Within a day, every major news network in the galaxy was broadcasting images of Jiwoo with the cubs. The headlines wrote themselves. Human kidnaps Vral cubs. Prey species holds predator young hostage. Are we heading toward war? Jiwoo watched the news with growing despair while Duri, Hana, and Sola played at his feet, completely unaware that they had become the center of galactic attention. They were just happy to be together, to be safe, to be loved. Then a new face appeared on his communication screen. Mr. Han Jiwoo, my name is Yoon Tail. I am a diplomatic liaison with training in xenopsychology. May I come aboard your station? Jiwoo agreed, mostly because Tail did not sound like he was planning to arrest anyone. The diplomat arrived 6 hours later, a calm-looking man in his 40s with kind eyes and a tablet full of research data. I have been studying Dr. Bae Hyun's notes on Vral bonding, Tail said, sitting carefully on Jiwoo's floor. Hana immediately came over to investigate him, sniffing his shoes with curiosity. What you have accomplished is remarkable. I did not accomplish anything. I just refused to let children die. That is more than most would do. Do you understand what these cubs represent? They prove that Vral are not just killing machines. They can bond with other species. They can choose their family. Tell that to the governments trying to take them away. Tail smiled slightly. I intend to. I have a proposal. Let the cubs stay with you, but under official observation. Human scientists and Viral observers working together to study this bond. Learn from it. If we can understand how this happened, maybe we can prevent future wars. You want to make them into experiments? I want to give you legal protection. Right now, you are a criminal in both human and Vral law. My proposal would make you a sanctioned research participant. The cubs would be safe and you would not go to prison. Jiwoo looked down at Sola, who had fallen asleep with its head on his foot. What do the Vral say about this? Commander Throck has agreed to present the idea to the Huntmaster Council. He seems very interested in what happens next, that was true. Throck had requested permission to stay on the station, claiming he needed to observe the cubs for an official report. But Jiwoo suspected the real reason was different. He had seen the way Throck watched the cubs play, watched them interact with Jiwoo. There was something in the warrior's eyes. Something like longing. The Huntmaster Council debated for 3 days. During that time, more Vral arrived at the station and more human officials. The small mining colony became the most important location in known space. Jiwoo's habitat was surrounded by security from both species. Finally, the decision came. The council would allow the cubs to stay with Jiwoo on 3 conditions. First, he would remain on the station under observation. Second, both human and Vral scientists would be allowed access to study the bonding process. Third, if the cubs showed any signs of becoming dangerous, they would be removed immediately. Jiwoo agreed. He had no choice, and besides, he had already planned to spend his life with these 3, even if the galaxy disapproved. The next weeks were strange. His small habitat was expanded into a larger research facility. Human xenobiologists and Vral observers moved into nearby modules. Cameras recorded everything. Scientists took constant readings, and Jiwoo's private life became a very public experiment. But through it all, the cubs remained the same. They grew larger and stronger each day. They learned more words in both human and Vral languages. They played, they explored. They slept curled around Jiwoo at night. They were children growing up in a loving home. Commander Throck visited often, more than his duties required. He would watch the cubs for hours, saying nothing. One day, Jiwoo found him standing outside the observation window, his large hand pressed against the glass as Hana played on the other side. "You could come inside," Jiwoo offered. "They are not afraid of you anymore. They should be afraid. I am a warrior. They know you will not hurt them, or me." Throck was silent for a long moment. "When I was young," he finally said, "I found an injured creature on a hunt. It was prey. Small, helpless. I wanted to take it back to the clan to heal it. My teacher said I was weak. He made me kill it myself to learn the proper way of thinking. I am sorry. I never forgot that creature. How it looked at me, trusting me even as I raised my claw. I told myself the teacher was right. There's no room for weakness in a warrior. But watching you with the cubs, I wonder, what if my teacher was wrong? What if the weakness I felt was actually strength? It takes more courage to protect than to destroy." Jiwoo said quietly. "Your species understands this. Mine does not. Or we have forgotten." Inside the habitat, Duri had found a ball and was trying to get Hana to play. Sola watched over them both, ever the protective sibling. They looked like any children anywhere in the galaxy, playing in the safety of home. "They are happy," Throck observed. "Yes. With you, not with clan. Maybe they have both now. Their own kind of clan." Throck turned to look at Jiwoo. "Some Vral are watching what happens here. Young ones, mostly. They see the cubs with you. They see how the cubs trust you, protect you, love you. They are asking questions that the elders do not want to answer." "What questions? If prey can become clan, what else have we been wrong about? If a human can love Vral cubs, why do we teach our young that all other species are only enemies or food? You have started something dangerous, Jiwoo of the humans. I just saved 3 children. Yes, and in doing so, you may have saved my entire species from ourselves." That night, as Jiwoo lay in bed with 3 growing Vral cubs pressed against him, he thought about Throck's words. He had not meant to start a revolution. He had just seen children who needed help and refused to walk away. But maybe that was how change always started, not with grand plans or brilliant strategies, just with one person deciding that kindness mattered more than fear. 3 months passed on the research station, and Jiwoo's life had transformed into something he never imagined. Every morning he woke up surrounded by 3 Vral cubs who were no longer small. Duri, Hana, and Sola had grown to the size of adult wolves, their muscles developing the strength that would eventually make them apex predators. Their claws could now easily slice through metal. Their jaws could crush bone. But they were still gentle with Jiwoo. They had learned to control their strength to play without hurting. When Sola tackled him in their morning games, the cub would carefully pin him down without using its claws. When Hana nuzzled against his face, she kept her teeth covered. When Duri handed him tools with its mouth, there was never a scratch. The scientists recorded everything with amazement. Dr. Bae-hyun visited frequently, taking endless notes. "The level of trust and control is unprecedented," he told Jiwoo. "Adult Vral struggle to modulate their strength. Your cubs do it instinctively around you." "They know I am fragile," Jiwoo said, watching Duri carefully move a heavy piece of equipment. "They adapt, but not everyone saw beauty in what was happening." Counselor Shin Yerim had been vocal from the start, calling Jiwoo's actions unnatural and dangerous. She led a faction of humans who believed Vral could never be trusted, that the cubs would eventually revert to their killing instincts. On the Vral side, High Hunter Krathis spoke for the traditionalists. He called the cubs contaminated and demanded they be removed from human contact before they corrupted other young Vral with their prey clan weakness. Jiwoo tried to ignore the political noise. His world revolved around 3 growing cubs who needed teaching, playing, and love. He showed them how to read human text. They showed him Vral hunting calls. He taught them mathematics. They taught him how to move silently through darkness. It was an exchange of cultures that should have been impossible. Commander Throck remained on the station, officially as an observer but increasingly as something like a friend. He would sit with Jiwoo in the evenings, watching the cubs practice their coordination exercises, and they would talk about everything from star navigation to what it meant to be family. The Huntmaster Council is changing, Throck told him one night, slowly. Some of the younger members see your cubs and wonder why we have always chosen violence over understanding. And the older members? They are afraid. Change is frightening, especially when it questions everything you have built your life around. That fear manifested 3 days later in the worst possible way. Jiwoo was asleep when the alarms woke him. Emergency lights flooded his habitat red. The cubs were on their feet instantly, scales shifting to combat patterns. Jiwoo's communication console screamed warnings. Habitat breach. Unknown hostiles. Sector compromised. Before Jiwoo could reach the door, it exploded inward. 4 creatures burst through, things he had never seen before. They looked like armored lizards the size of bears with too many legs and mouths full of jagged teeth. Scrax, his mind supplied. Predators from a nearby world, illegal to import, deadly even to armed soldiers. The cubs reacted immediately. Sola charged the nearest Scrax, using its superior agility to dodge the creature's snapping jaws. Dury went for another, its 8 limbs working in perfect coordination to climb and strike from above. Hana positioned herself directly between Jiwoo and the remaining 2 Scrax. Jiwoo grabbed the first weapon he could find, a heavy cutting tool from his workbench. It was not a gun. It was not even a good club. But it was something. He swung it at a Scrax that was trying to circle around Hana, the impact sending vibrations up his arms. The Scrax turned on him with rage in its eyes. Jiwoo barely dodged its lunge, rolling behind his overturned table. He could hear the cubs fighting, their hisses and the Scrax's roars echoing in the enclosed space. Where was security? Why was no one helping? Then he saw Hana go down. A Scrax had gotten past her guard and slashed across her side. She screamed, a sound that tore through Jiwoo's heart. She tried to get up, but her legs collapsed under her. The Scrax moved in for the kill, Jiwoo did not think. He ran, throwing himself between Hana and the Scrax. He felt claws rake across his shoulder, felt teeth close on his arm. Pain exploded through his body. But he did not move. He stayed over Hana, protecting her with his own body, just as she had tried to protect him. Sola's roar shook the habitat. The cub moved like lightning, covering the distance in a heartbeat. It hit the Scrax with the full force of its growing mass, claws finding vital points with instinctive precision. The Scrax died quickly, too quickly for mercy but quick enough to end its threat. Dury had dispatched another Scrax, and together the cubs drove the remaining 2 back through the broken door. Jiwoo could hear fighting in the corridor outside, could hear human and Viral voices shouting orders. But his vision was getting dark. He collapsed next to Hana, his hand finding her scales. "You are okay," he whispered to her. "Stay with me," the cub whimpered, pressing closer to him despite her own pain. Sola and Dury returned, circling them both protectively. When the security team finally arrived, led by Commander Throck and Chief Minji, they found 3 Vral cubs standing guard over 2 wounded members of their family, refusing to let anyone close until Jiwoo weakly called out that it was safe. The medical team worked quickly. Jiwoo's injuries were serious but not fatal. Hana needed surgery, but she would survive. The other 2 cubs were scratched and bruised but otherwise whole. As Jiwoo drifted in and out of consciousness, he heard fragments of conversation. The Scrax were released deliberately. Someone wanted this to happen. We found evidence. Counselor Yareem and High Hunter Krathes working together. They wanted to prove the cubs would turn on him. Instead, they proved the opposite. The footage is already spreading across the networks. Everyone saw the human protect the Vral cub with his own body. When Jiwoo finally woke up in the medical bay, he found all 3 cubs pressed around his bed. They had refused to leave despite doctor's orders. Hana was bandaged but awake, her head resting on his uninjured arm. Sola lay at the foot of the bed, eyes open and alert. Duri sat by the door, watching every person who entered with suspicious eyes. "Hey," Jiwoo said softly. His voice was rough, his throat dry. "I am okay. We are all okay." Hana made a sound between a purr and a cry. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed with relief. Sola shifted closer, careful not to jostle his injuries. Duri came to the bedside and gently touched Jiwoo's hand with one claw, so carefully that it did not even leave a mark. Throck entered the room, his massive frame filling the doorway. "The conspirators have been arrested," he said. "Both governments are ashamed. They sent killers to attack children. Are we safe now?" The galaxy watched you throw yourself over Hana without hesitation. A fragile human protecting a Vral cub from death, using his own body as a shield. That image is everywhere. Both Counselor Yerim and High Hunter Krathus have lost all support. No one wants to be associated with attacking families, especially not families that would die for each other. Jiwoo looked at the 3 cubs around him. "They saved my life, and you saved theirs. Many times now. The Huntmaster Council is meeting as we speak. They have never seen loyalty like this between species. It changes things. Changes us. I did not do it to change anything. I did it because they are my family. Yes. That is why it matters." Over the next days, as Jiwoo recovered, he watched the galactic news with amazement. The attack footage had become the most viewed recording in history. Commentators from every species analyzed it endlessly. The moment when Jiwoo covered Hana with his body, when Sola charged in with protective fury, when all 3 cubs refused to leave their wounded family member, it had touched something fundamental across species lines. Parents everywhere recognized that protective instinct. Children recognized that trust. Even species that had never met humans or Vral understood the bond they were witnessing. The conversation had shifted. It was no longer about whether Vral could be trusted. It was about what family meant when boundaries disappeared. It was about choosing love over fear. 5 years had passed since Jiwoo found 3 dying cubs in an abandoned mining shaft. Now he stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, a neutral world created specifically for interspecies families like his. Behind him, he could hear Duri explaining quantum mathematics to a group of young students, both human and Vral. Hana was in the training center, teaching combat techniques that emphasized control and protection over raw aggression. Sola was meeting with diplomats, serving as a translator between human and Vral cultural concepts. His cubs were not cubs anymore. They stood 3 meters tall, their scales gleaming with health and strength. They could tear through steel walls if they wanted. They could kill armed soldiers with ease. But they chose gentleness. They chose to build rather than destroy. They chose to teach rather than hunt. Still hard to believe sometimes, is it not? Commander Throck joined him at the window. The warrior no longer wore combat armor. He wore the robes of a cultural ambassador, a position he had accepted after speaking openly about his changing views on Vral tradition. "Every day I wake up surprised," Jiwoo admitted. "I just wanted to save 3 lives. I never meant to start a revolution. The best revolutions are always started by people who do not mean to start them. They just refuse to accept cruelty as inevitable." It was true. The change had rippled outward from Jiwoo's habitat like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Young Vral across the Dominion had watched the cubs grow up with a human parent. They had seen that strength did not have to mean violence, that being a predator did not mean lacking compassion. Some had begun questioning other traditions, asking why war was always the first response, why mercy was considered weakness. The Huntmaster Council had split. The old guard held to tradition, but a growing number of younger members wanted reform. They called themselves the New Path, and they pointed to Duri, Hana, and Sola as proof that Vral could evolve without losing their identity. On the human side, people who had lived in fear of Vral for generations watched cubs playing with human children on broadcast news. They saw Vral teenagers learning human art and music. They heard Vral voices speaking gently, saw Vral claws handling fragile objects with impossible care. Fear did not disappear overnight, but it began to crack. Admiral Cho Dae-hyun, once determined to enforce protocol at any cost, now commanded the Joint Human-Vral Defense Initiative. He admitted openly that Jiwoo had been right to break the rules. "Sometimes the rules are wrong," he said in a famous interview. "Sometimes one person with courage matters more than 1,000 laws." Dr. Bae-hyun had published his research on cross-species bonding, work that won awards across the scientific community. He discovered that many species had the capacity for these bonds, but cultural barriers had prevented them from forming. Jiwoo and his cubs had simply been the first to break through. Yoon Tail now ran the Xenocultural Exchange Institute, with offices on 50 worlds. Thousands of families had formed across species lines inspired by what they had seen. Human families adopting Vral cubs, Vral adults mentoring human children, other species joining in, creating bonds that previous generations would have called impossible. Chief Minji had established protection programs to keep these new families safe from those who opposed change. She trained security forces from multiple species to defend what she called the future we want to build, not the past we are escaping. Not everyone approved. There were still those who called Jiwoo's family an abomination. There were still attacks, still protests, still voices demanding a return to the old ways. But they were fewer now and quieter. It is hard to argue that love is dangerous when you can see it working with your own eyes. A young Vral approached Jiwoo on the observation deck. She was barely adolescent, her scales still showing the bright patterns of youth. "Excuse me, clan leader Jiwoo?" Jiwoo smiled at the title. It had become his official designation in Vral records, a new category created specifically for him. "Yes? My name is Vess. I was watching Hana's training session. She said I should ask you something." "What is it?" "I want to work with human children, to teach them about Vral culture, to learn about theirs. But my clan home says this is wrong, that I should focus on hunting and warfare. They say I am betraying our heritage." The young Vral's voice trembled. "Am I wrong to want something different?" Jiwoo put his hand on Vess's scaled shoulder. 5 years ago, such a gesture would have been unthinkable. Now it was natural. Your heritage is not just about being a warrior. It is about being strong enough to protect what matters. And sometimes what matters most is building bridges instead of walls. Hana told you to ask me because she knows I will tell you this. Follow your heart. The galaxy needs people who choose understanding over fear. Vess's markings brightened with hope. "Thank you, clan leader." After the young Vral left, Throck nodded approvingly. "You gave good counsel. 5 years ago, a Vral like Vess would have been forced into warrior training regardless of her wishes. Now she has choices, because you showed us that choices do not make us weak. The cubs showed that, not me. You raised them to be who they are. That was your choice." That evening, Jiwoo gathered with his family in their quarters on Harmony Station. The space was much larger than his old mining habitat, designed to accommodate 3 full-grown Vral and 1 human comfortably. Duri was reading a book on human philosophy, occasionally making notes in both written languages. Hana was teaching Sola a new human song, their voices creating an odd harmony of human melody and Vral harmonics. They had dinner together, sharing food from both cultures. Jiwoo had learned to eat some Vral dishes, though his stomach still protested the raw meat. The cubs had developed a taste for human vegetables, which no Vral nutritionist could explain, but all accepted as part of their unique upbringing. "Tomorrow we have the ceremony," Sola said, switching between human and Vral language mid-sentence as they all did now. "Are you nervous?" "A little," Jiwoo admitted. The ceremony was historic. For the first time, Vral cubs would formally request dual citizenship, belonging to both the Vral Dominion and Human Federation. It required new laws, new treaties, new ways of thinking about what citizenship meant. Duri, Hana, and Sola would be the first, but dozens of other cubs were waiting to follow their example. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we stay together," Hana said firmly. "That is what matters." "Always together," Duri agreed, reaching over to bump Jiwoo gently with their head. "You are our family. Nothing changes that." Sola moved closer, wrapping one set of limbs around Jiwoo in what had become their version of a hug. "When we were dying in that shaft, I did not believe we would survive. Then you came. You saw us and chose to care. That choice saved us, and maybe it saved more than us." Jiwoo leaned into Sola's embrace, feeling the rumble of the Vral's purr through his bones. It was still strange sometimes being surrounded by beings who could easily kill him, but chose instead to love him. But it was a good strange. "A right strange. I just did what anyone should do," he said quietly. "No," Duri corrected. "You did what almost no one would do. You saw children where others saw monsters. You chose compassion where the galaxy expected fear. That is not common. That is special. Your species is special," Throck added from the doorway. He visited often enough that Jiwoo had given him access codes. We Vral are strong. We can hunt, we can fight, we can survive in conditions that would kill most beings. But humans have a different strength. You refuse to accept that the universe must be cruel. You keep insisting it can be better. And sometimes just by insisting loudly enough you make it true. Not just humans, Jiwoo said. You changed too. You and others like you. You were brave enough to question everything you were taught. Because you showed us it was possible to question, the cubs proved that change does not mean weakness. Later, after Throck left and the cubs settled down for sleep, Jiwoo stood by the window looking out at the stars. Harmony Station orbited a beautiful blue planet, one designated as neutral territory where any species could live freely. Ships from dozens of worlds docked here daily, bringing families who wanted to try something new. Somewhere on this station, a Vral adult was reading bedtime stories to adopted human children. Somewhere else, a human family was teaching their Vral daughter how to paint. In the medical bay, a human doctor and Vral surgeon worked together on procedures that would save lives from both species. In the schools, children of all kinds learned together, played together, became friends. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still misunderstandings, still moments when old fears resurfaced. But it was better. Every day it got a little bit better. Behind him, Jiwoo heard the soft sounds of his family sleeping. Duri's gentle snores, Hana's sleep murmurs that sounded like distant music, Sola's rhythmic breathing. They still slept near him every night, even though they no longer fit in one bed. They had their own sleeping platforms now, arranged in a circle around his, close enough to reach him if he needed them. 5 years ago, Jiwoo had been alone, working a boring job on a forgotten asteroid, trying to forget the family he had lost. Now he had a family again, strange and impossible and perfect. Now he had purpose, watching the galaxy change one relationship at a time. Now he had hope. Tomorrow they would make history. But tonight, Jiwoo simply appreciated what he had already accomplished. 3 small lives saved. 3 children raised with love. 3 bridges built between species that were supposed to be eternal enemies. The Predator's cubs had refused to go back to their den. And in that refusal, they had shown the galaxy something it desperately needed to see. That family is not about biology. That strength is not about violence. That the most powerful force in the universe is not fear or hatred or the drive to dominate. It is the simple, stubborn decision to care about someone different from yourself, to see a stranger and choose compassion, to find someone in need and refuse to walk away. That was humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not technology or weapons or clever strategies. Just the irrational, illogical, completely unreasonable insistence that kindness matters more than survival instinct. And sometimes, just sometimes, the galaxy listens.